Hello again, and hot on the heels of N=18, which was all about Android and custom controls, here is N=19, which I hope will be a little bit about iOS and custom controls. So where I thought we would start is just by picking up from exactly the same project. So let me do that. So this is the same project, customcontrols.droid, which if you remember, if you haven't seen it, is a very simple project which has got one view model which just has a shape inside it, and then one view which has two types of custom control. Just see them. So we've got the first type of custom control is this subclass text view, which changes color as well as text, and the second type of custom control is this owner draw view underneath. And what I'd like to do is exactly the same thing but in iOS. So that's it. So in order to do that, I am going to have to do a little bit of hacking because there's a control that's not in the NuGet packages yet for iOS, but hopefully that won't be too bad for anyone to follow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom controls.touch, which is just going to be a hello world application, and hopefully that'll create quite quickly. And in this custom controls, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a reference to my core project to bring in that first view model. And then I'm going to bring in the NuGet packages for MvvmCross, exactly as we're expecting. So MvvmCross, not fee, sorry about that. MvvmCross, and just pull in the main package. Once we've done that, we know that on touch there's one more step, which is this delegate file, and we just take that delegate file and we copy it across. And then what we'd like to do is actually just start on our UI. So if we take a look at the UI, currently it obviously won't even build, but let me just fix that up. So currently it won't build because we've got this hello field and we need to change it to a shape. So let's do that. And then we should be able to actually at least build this project. Build. Okay, so that builds, but obviously it's not going to do very much at the moment. And what we need to do is we need to change this text field here into something that is actually going to allow us to do some kind of combo box. Now, by default, we don't have a combo box in iOS, but what you can do is you can use a UI PickerView. And so that's what I'm going to start doing first. And in order to do that, and this is where the slight hack is at the moment, so I'm going to put it in a folder called hack. Here we go. New folder hack. There's a MVXPicker view model. Not a view model in the MVVM sense, but a view model in the iOS sense. And so I'm going to call it hack picker view model. And what it is this, there is going to be an MVXPicker view model. There is one in the checked into source control, but there isn't one that's out there in these NuGet packages at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import that text myself and import it in and show you what it looks like, and then we'll use it. So yeah, hopefully by the time you actually get to downloading this, it'll be available in NuGet. You won't have to do this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to just replace it with existing text. And so this is the existing MVXPicker view model, and you can see it, it's called an MVXPicker view model, and you don't need to know how this works other than it does all the binding we kind of expect to notify collection changed, and it brings in an item source. As I say, hopefully by the time you actually get to use this will be in the main library. If not, you know where it is here. And so let me just call it, rather than using this name, I'll leave it as MVXPicker view model. When it finally gets into the true source, it will be available for us. Right, so to use this, what we do, and apologies that it's a bit more fiddly to set up, is you have to create a picker view model. And hopefully IntelliSense will give us the thing. And what you also need to do with that is you need to create a picker to use with it. So we're going to create a picker, and that's a new UI picker view. View. And we won't pass in any parameters or a size, it'll just work that out for us on its own. And what you do is you just hook the two up like that, and then you should be able to do picker.PickerTop. So what you should be able to do is set the model, so that's picker.model. It's going to be our picker view model. And yeah, it is a bit confusing, these are called view models, but it's what they're called in iOS, so it's what they're called in UI kits, so that's why we're using it. And then what we need to do is this text field up above. What we'd like to do is we would like to set its input view, and you can see it's come up by default suggesting it, to the picker. And what that means is instead of using a keyboard for its input view, it will actually use this UI picker view. So this kind of combo box type thing is what will come up by default. And hopefully that will all make sense to us when we actually just go across and look at it. Maybe. So the last thing we need to do is actually set up the binding for our PickerView model. Yeah. So what we do is we bind, and because the framework doesn't know about PickerView models by default, we're going to have to do a little bit more work than we normally do, but not much. So we have a picker, and what that binds for is for the picker we want to bind its item source to the list of things. Sorry, for the PickerView model is what we're binding, not the picker. So what the PickerView model we bind for is the item source, and we bind that to our list in the view model. So that's view model for, or Anders if you prefer the Anders notation, and that's the list. And then the next thing we need to bind is we need to bind the picker's view model actually selected item. So let's just see what we do there for, and this is going to be p dot, this would be selected item, and that's going to bind to our shape on the view model. If you're not familiar with what this view model is, just go back and look at watch n equals 18. It's only about 25-30 minutes, and hopefully it'll make sense to you straightforwardly. So you can see we've set up our bindings for label and for text field, and we've set up our bindings for view model. So now if we go and we run this, let me just see. If I set this as the startup project, and if I choose iPhone Simulator, and if I choose iPhone Retina 1, then what we should be able to do is we should be able to run this. So let's do debug start new, and I'll also obviously need to set up my remote window to my BNC viewer. Hopefully it's still on that IP address, and the password is still password. So let's pull that one up, and hopefully it'll come back. And I can see over here it is actually launching already, so we might be a bit slow. Right, so I need to get in through this password as well. The password. And then you can see that what's actually launched over here is we've got kind of our text label at the top and then our text field. And if we tap on that text field, then instead of getting a keyboard, we'll get our picker view. So there it is. Let me just either push this a bit higher on the screen. And you can see here that we have, sorry, I'm losing my mouse. We have got our 3 items from the list. And if we choose one, then we'll see the binding changes. Yeah, it's not particularly clear at the moment, so there is some setup we can change. And so let me just change back here, and I think it's on the picker. There's a neater way of showing things, so let me just do that as well. So if we go picker dot show selection indicator equals true, then that means that it will show a nicer bar across it. Right, so that's our basic UI setup. Let me just prove that that is working. Slightly nicer selection. So we wait for it to start over on the iOS simulator. Hopefully it's deploying. There it goes. It's launching. And when this launches, you can see now that if we bring that picker up, it's got a slightly nicer selection on it. And you can see we can choose circle, square, and the binding just works for us. So that's our basic framework setup. And then what I'd like to do is exactly as we did with Droid, there are 2 types of controls I'd like to pull in. The first one is going to be a custom control. There's going to be a subclassed control. So let me bring in a controls folder. And then the second one will be an owner draw control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class. And so this is going to be a label we want first of all, just as we had it in Touch. We had a label for which kind of changed color as well as text. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a shape label as a class. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it public. I'd like to make it inherit from a UI label because we're subclassing a UI label. And then what I'm going to do is just a couple of like boilerplate things. You don't have to do all of these, but it's good to do them. So first of all, I'm going to register it with with Cocoa Touch, as it were. And this means that I can actually use this later on in Zib editors if I want to. I won't within this video, but I could if I want to now. And then the second thing I'm going to do is just create a few standard constructors. So the first one is an empty one. I'll just create that. The second one is going to be a constructor which takes an int pointer. So this again is one that can be used, this is one that's used when you do create a Zib-based control. So it's good to have in there like that. The next one I'd like to create is a rectangle one, so that you can create it and give it a frame. So let's do that as well. So this shape label, I'll give it a rectangle F, just going to be its frame, and I'll pass that to base as well. So those are its base properties. Nothing, no base constructors. There's nothing too difficult or too exciting there. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to give this custom control, this kind of subclass UI label, a special property. And the property I'll give it is a shape property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it the shape, exactly as I did with Android. And so I'll add get and set to that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use resharper to change that to a property backing field. And then what I'll do is when the shape actually changes, I'm going to call update UI. And I'll create that method. And what do we want to do in update UI? Well, there are a few things we want to do. First of all, we'd like to actually change our underlying text to be the shape .toString. So we'll do that. And then secondly, what I'd like to do is I'd like to change the color exactly as I did with the Android. So here we go, just generate these things. And to do this, what I do is I'm just going to call set text color or C color. I don't think I can actually just set the text color. Let me find out. Maybe I can. Let's find out. UI color dot. Okay, so the first one's going to be cyan. If it's a square, I'll go with red. And if it's a triangle, I'll go with magenta. I'll see if this works or whether I've missed a step. So those are our, that's our shape label. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use shape label instead of using UI label. So here we are here. I'm going to have a UI label currently. We're going to change that to a shape label. You can see there's nothing else we need to change. And what I'm also going to do is currently what I'm doing is I'm binding the label to the shape. But what I'm binding there implicitly is I'm binding the text value. But what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to bind the, so it's a shape label, we know that. I'd like to bind the shape property. So it's a brand new property and binding can just pick it up just like that. So if I save this and build, and let me see if I've made any mistakes. Nope. So I should now be able to run this. And over on the Mac, hopefully it will deploy and run up. So when I get over there on the Mac, what we should be able to see, I hope, is we should now see that this top label, not only do we get the text changing, but we also get the color. So we are using our custom property and we've successfully subclassed our UI label. Any of the controls can be subclassed and you've just got access to them, so it's exactly what you expect from subclassing. Okay, so that's a subclassed control. Didn't take too long to do. The next and final thing I want to do in this little N+1 is to do an owner draw control. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new class and we will call this a shape view because it's a owner draw view if you like. And again what we're going to do is just the boilerplate stuff. So here we go, public class, and this is going to be a UI view rather than a UI label. So UI view is just the base widget slash control slash view class. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to register this with the Cocoa kit, Cocoa UI. And so that's going to be a shape view. And again, what we'll do is we'll just create those three constructors. So the default constructor, the constructor that takes an int pointer, just passes it down to the thing, and finally a constructor that takes a rect. So rectangle f frame. And again, we just pass all of these parameters, whatever they are, down to the base class. And then what we'd like to do now we've got this is we'd like to add another similar property. So let's do it. So this property is a public shape. And this shape is going to be called the shape again. And again, we'll just use resharper to turn it from a property to an auto property to one with a backing field. And what we'd like to do is when the shape gets set, we'd like to ask the UI to redraw itself. And the way you do this will be really familiar if you are a Windows programmer, or if you're a old school C++ Windows programmer with wparams, and if you've seen what we did in Droid, there we kind of call invalidate. Here what we call set needs a display, and that tells it that it needs to be redrawn. How does it get drawn? Well, that's the next thing we need to do, is actually just implement the draw method. And to do that, it's an override again, and what we override is draw, and that takes us a rect for what it needs to be drawn. So we do that, and then what we do in here is there's various things we can do, and there's actually a really good program called PixelCut, which I may show you. It's really good. It's a PaintCode app is what it's from. It's from PixelCut company, and it's on the Mac. Let me just actually show you on the Mac. So on the Mac there's this program here called PaintCode, and if you run it up and you do a new, a file new, then what you get is you get this kind of design surface, and you can draw things on here like a circle and a rounded rect, and you can fill them with all sorts of fill colors and other things you might want. And what it does down the bottom here is it actually generates the code for you, and you can cut and paste that code if you want to into your application, and that really gives you a very powerful tool. So I think it's like $70. It's well worth it if you're going to do a lot of owner draw stuff. But for now I'll come back and I'll just show you how we do it by hand if we don't have these tools. And so what we do is, what you can do is you can call UI graphics .get current context, and this will give you a context onto which you can draw. Again, if you're used to any owner draw stuff in any framework, this will all feel quite familiar to you, but also just slightly different. So take your time in actually learning this and working out how you're going to use it. And then what I'd like to do is I'm probably just going to make the whole thing white. So let's do context set fill color, and what I'll do is I'll use UI color .white .cg color, and what I'll do is I'll fill the entire area. So that's fill rect, and just pass in everything we've been asked to draw. So you can see that we're going to start off with a white area, no worries. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch, you can just get hold of this, switch on the shape, oops, did it for me. And again, I use resharper to generate the switch statements. And then what I'd like to do is, depending on what's being passed into us, we're going to draw different things. So for the circle, what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this. Actually, this is quite similar. So we'll take the context, and for the circle, I think we chose cyan, was it, or in the previous example? And rather than fill rect, obviously what we'd like to do is we'd like to fill an ellipse in rect. So that's that one done for the circle. For the square, what we'd like to do is we would like, I think we used red for the square. Let's use red. And again, here we just want to call fill rect. And for a triangle, we have to do something just subtly different. So for a triangle, just as we did with Android, where we have to do all sorts of point to, move to, line to, etc. We're going to do the same sort of thing. So we're going to set the fill color to be magenta. And then what I think we can do is context dot begin path, context dot move to, and so we're just going to pass in the parameters. So what we'll do is halfway along the top, so rect dot width divided by 2, and we'll do it at 0, so it's the top. And then what we're going to do is just move along. So let's do context dot line to, So this is add line to point, and this is going to be bottom left. So this one is 0, rect.height. And then we'd like another line, and so this is going to be at the bottom right. So this is rect.width and rect.height. And then what we'd like to do is close the path just to get back to the top. So this is close path. And then what we should be able to do is we should be able to call fill path, which will fill everything that we've done so far. And then I think just for completeness we could, no, that's probably it. That's probably all we need to do. So I believe that might be the code that works. Who knows? We'll find out. And so now we've written it, let's take shape view and let's use it. So we've got shape view here. So back in our first view, what we're going to do is we're going to add a shape view. So here we go, var shape view. And this is going to be a new shape view, and we'll pass in its properties. So we will, let's see, how wide do we want this? We'll probably want this 200 wide. So this is going to be at 60, 90, 200, 200. So that's going to be its width and height. Hopefully I got that roughly central. And we'll add the shape view to ourselves. And then what we can do is we need to bind the shape view. So down here, we're going to bind set.bind. And again, just as with the custom PickerView and just as with the custom label, the shape label, we need to tell it what property it wants to bind on. So let's do that. So we want to bind to the so this is for the shape view. We want to bind to the shape view's the shape property, and we want to bind it to the view models the shape property. So let's just do that. And that should just work for us. That should have hooked everything up. So let's see how badly my drawing went. And let's go debug start new. Now over on the Mac, hopefully that's going to start up with PaintCode in the background. So hopefully it's deploying, unless I got something wrong. Here it goes. And it's going to start up, and there is the circle that's drawn for us. And if I tap on this to bring up that control, and I change it to square, you can see it changes to square. If I change to triangle, it does indeed change to a triangle. Now there's a few things I need to do. Obviously I could do with hiding this panel when it comes up. So let me just do that. And that's, I think you've seen in several examples already. I tend to use a tap gesture to do that on the background. So let me just do that. So this is going to be a var g equals new UI tap gesture recognizer. And the action I want to take when that happens is that the text field dot resign first responder, please. And I just add that to myself. So view dot add gesture recognizer G. So hopefully that should mean we can then actually hide that. Let me just see. But other than that, hopefully we finished our demo. So what you should have seen at this point, if we got this right, is you should have seen exactly as we did in Droid, we can now do in iOS, which is that we can subclass existing controls, like we subclass the label, where it comes, and we can actually subclass view, and from view we can then, so yeah, here we go with circle, square, triangle, and from view we can also subclass the drawing, we can do an owner draw. So that's it. That's the app running on iOS. Over on Droid, it can still run as well. I have to remember what it's called. Debug start new. So on Droid, you get exactly the same effect. And I guess what I'll do is I'll try and do the same thing in Windows next, which will be interesting because I haven't done that before. So here's the same app on Droid. And so in the next little N+1 I'll try and do the same thing in Windows. I hope that's useful to you. It's not something I use every day, but where you need to subclass controls or where you need to do your owner draw controls, it's there for you. Cool. I'll be back shortly with n = 20.